Parking structure weirdo. 10 a.m. broad daylight. Couldn't find a spot. Parked on the top level of a nearby parking structure. Some guy stopped near me as I was leaving the structure and asked me if I was leaving and if I wanted a ride. I said no, and he slowly followed me out. I stopped to tie my shoe and he stopped. I kept going, and he kept going, slow enough to remain behind me. I stopped again. He stopped again. I kept going around. He kept going again. He didn't follow me out of the structure, but 6 hours later I came back and he was still lurking around. He stopped his car in weird places and moved away from me when I got near. I was walking around looking for my car. I wasn't trying to go near him. He then stopped right in front of my car and kept his car on, at which point I left and called someone. I came back, and his car was parked in the space opposite of mine. I got in my car and drove out of the structure, but he didn't follow me. I have to go back again tomorrow. What should I do? OkCupid weirdo. Maybe not the creepiest thing to ever happen to me, but it definitely made me deactivate my account and look behind my shoulder. I was 19 years old at the time this happened, single, attending college at a university in my hometown. I still lived at home. I had friends, but I was romantically alone, so I decided to download OkCupid and give it a whirl. I had friends who had used the app with moderate success. I considered myself streetwise and knew I could always deactivate it if anything creepy happened. I didn't choose a username that could directly lead to finding me on social media, and I didn't link up a Tinder account. I didn't list anything overtly personal in my profile, just interests like music and movies. The usual I like hiking, let's get to know each other, blah 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 blah. Things went mostly fine. I got pervy messages, nothing too extreme. I conversed pleasantly with some men and went on some dates. I felt safe. Then one day, I logged into my Facebook and had a chat request. He told me his name was Ryan, and he was college-aged, attending school at my university, looking for friends. Now keep in mind, I had also been in a group on Facebook about finding friends on campus, because I often felt alienated there. I thought this was a man from the group, so my messages were very friendly and trying to get to know you type chats. The conversation was fine at first, but I thought it was odd that he didn't have a profile picture. He kept begging me for more pictures of myself, but demurring when I asked for a picture of him. He would bemoan how ugly he was, and how pretty girls never liked hideous guys. I tried to be nice, but it started bothering me. Then, the messages started getting bizarre. He kept asking me where I was going to be in class, or go to class the next day. I didn't respond. They started getting more and more frequent and hysterical. I'm talking 20 or 30 a day, begging me to respond. Then finally, in terrible punctuation, I see you every day sitting in the Mac lab in the library. You are cute. Please talk to me. My blood ran cold. He sent me an accompanying picture of himself. I recognized him as a man who had harassed me on OkCupid and who I had eventually blocked. He was probably at least 20 years older than me, balding, with extremely yellow teeth. I'm not trying to judge someone on appearance, but something in his eyes was wild, and it just didn't sit right. I'm not sure if I'm describing this right, but his eyes, they were just like black pits. He really creeped me out. Somehow he found my personal Facebook from OkCupid, and I'm not even sure how, but he also knew I had studied at X library in the Mac lab, and made it clear he had been watching me for quite some time. There was no way he would have known that unless he had been actively, physically stalking me. I had never seen him on campus and never saw him again. I blocked him instantly from Facebook and always checked behind my back when I walked at night on campus. For a while I worried he was still stalking me at the library, so I changed the locations I'd study at. It was all very nerve-wracking. So, creepy stalker OkCupid dude, let's not meet. Good Samaritan or major weirdo? I am a 24-year-old girl who is an ex-heroin addict, and I've been clean for a year and a half. I grew up in a privileged home in a major city, but got into drugs when I was 13 years old. My life went downhill for the worst when my dad died and I got hooked on heroin. I've been a heroin addict for 4 years by the time in the story, and I was living a life of drugs and crime. I had just separated from my boyfriend and hang with drug dealers to pass the time, literally sleeping wherever I could when I was hanging with this guy, Frenchie. He figured he could use me to do a drug pick at a pharmacy with a fake script. I was so tweaked out and paranoid at the time that I flat out refused, and he got so mad that he kicked me out of the car and drove off with all of my shit. Being that I had nothing, my phone was dead, and my life was in shambles in the worst possible way. I was crying in a random parking lot when this young, mid-20s tall Asian guy came up to comfort me. Guys always wanted to save me because I am an attractive woman, and I was a real example of damsel in distress. So, this guy says he will help me, and since I have nothing at all, no money, no clothes, and nowhere to call home, I was desperate and agreed to let him take me back to his house. He seemed really nerdy, but I was a drug addict and my judgment was totally wrong. I just wanted to shower and assemble my life in any way I could. So we get in his car, and he ends up driving to a town outside the city, more than an hour away. So I started to get sketched out, but then we got to his place, and he lived with his mom, and when we got there, he just started talking to her in another language, and told me I could go in the shower. Now before I got in the shower, he told me to leave my phone outside the bathroom, huge red flag right there. I proceeded to tell him it was dead, and that wasn't necessary. So I went to the bathroom and proceeded to take the quickest shower ever. I literally rushed out of my clothes, let the water run over me, and got out. As I was rushing to get my clothes on, he jimmies the lock and comes in his boxers, and I literally scramble out of there and grab my stuff and run outside. We were in a locked complex, and he came after me and said, "What was wrong? Why was I running away?" I proceeded to tell him I was having a panic attack, and I needed to get high, and he needed to take me to the store so I could get to foil to smoke my drugs on. He then locked me in his car and drove through a wooded area, and began to lecture me on why I can't use drugs anymore if we were gonna be together. I told him I need to wean off, and I have a massive anxiety attack, and needs to get me to the store or to the hospital quick. So he reluctantly took me to the store and told me to stay in the car. And when he went into the store, I ran out of the car into the restaurant next door, grabbed the waitress and told her to meet me in the bathroom, when I proceeded to tell her the story about the guy trying to abduct me. Luckily, she told me there was a police officer there at the bar with his wife, and I proceeded to give them a report of the events. And they found him lurking for me outside the restaurant, and they arrested him and took me all the way home over an hour away. Needless to say, this is right before I got sober, and my life is nothing like this today. I have a job and support myself and don't do drugs or associate with people who do. But creepy Asian guy, let's never meet again. Stalker caused me to drop out of school. Right after I graduated high school, I went to our community college, where my best friend at the time and her boyfriend also attended, along with a lot of their friends who I became acquainted with as well. Fast forward to Halloween of 2010, we took my best friend's little sister and brother out trick-or-treating, where her boyfriend ended up joining us. We were towards the end of the route when one of their friends from the college ended up joining us, which I didn't think anything about at the time, other than he gave me a weird vibe. Should have been my first clue. After we were done trick-or-treating, we brought the kids home to go to bed, but my friend wanted to do something to keep the night going, since it was Halloween and in a college town, that's an excuse to party, just like any other day. They decided on going downtown, but I declined, since I wasn't feeling well, which was true, but I was also the only one with a car, and didn't want to be the chauffeur, and went home. A few hours later, I was in bed reading a book. I still live with my mom and brother, and my phone lit up from a number I didn't recognize. It was a friend that joined us while trick-or-treating. He explained that he got my number from my best friend's boyfriend, and he was concerned that I didn't feel well and insisted on bringing me soup to feel better. Some sort of red flag went off in my head, and I didn't want this guy to know where I lived, so I said no. My mom was taking care of it, but thank you anyways. He got a little pushy, but eventually backed down and proceeded to send me many texts about how much fun he had when we were out and blah 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 blah. I later found out he bailed going downtown too, because he only wanted to go with me. He then added me to Facebook, went through all my pictures and liked all of them. Second red flag. Being the naive 18-year-old I was, I just thought maybe he was a little overtly friendly and just a little weird, I guess. So I didn't avoid him or anything at school, since we hung out with the same people. One day, when we didn't have school, he texted me, asking if I wanted to go to lunch. I should have said no, and I accepted, thinking I was getting a free meal out of the deal, since he insisted on paying, and it would be a quick visit. We met at the restaurant and sat down and talked and ate. It was super awkward, and then I stupidly mentioned I wanted to go to the mall to get some stuff. He insisted on driving me there, and that his mom can move to the back seat. Wait, what? Apparently, he drove his mom's minivan, brought her with him, and left her in the car while we went on our date. I kept saying that she'd come join us and stuff like that, and he got really weird about it and said she was napping and she didn't mind waiting. At that point, I started getting very uncomfortable. Luckily, we were done with our food, and I said I needed to leave. Thanked him for the food and got up to go. He kept saying he'll meet me at the mall, and I was put in what I felt like was a weird position, and I am not an assertive person, so I reluctantly said, okay. We meet at a large store connected to the mall, and I mentioned how I was here to look for a new scarf, and started browsing. He picked out the most expensive one he could find, and bought it for me, and basically almost threatened me to not return it. It was then I wanted to be left alone, so I said thank you, and I was going to go home now. He insisted on walking me out to my car. We parked on opposite ends of the mall, and his mom was still inside the van, and I kept saying, it was okay, I was fine. He was a big guy, and even simple walking caused him to break out in a sweat, but he wouldn't take no for an answer, so away we went. We passed by another, and took a quick peek inside. There were a pair of boots that I very quickly, in passing, mentioned they were cute, but I don't know if I'd wear them. He bought them for me and did the same, somewhat threatened not to return them, because they were gifts, and you don't return gifts! Like, dude, then what are gifts receipts for? At that point, I got a little firm, and told him I wanted some time alone, so please don't walk me out to my car. He accepted and went his merry way, clearly happy that he made those purchases to show me he liked me. I go out to my car and probably wait for about 20 minutes. I knew what his van looked like at this point, and kept my eye out for it, in case he was going to follow me home, but didn't see anything. I actually ended up going back to the mall, and returned the boots and scarf. In reality, I didn't want either of them, and I was way too uncomfortable accepting those as gifts from a strange person. I don't like owing people, and I had a feeling he was going to use that as some sort of leverage to get something from me. I took the long way home to make sure I wasn't being followed, and I told my mother about what happened. She was concerned, and thought it was strange as well, since he and I didn't really know each other, and it seemed like a weird act of desperation. I got a text from him a few hours later, saying he hoped I liked his gifts. I responded, saying that I returned them because I wasn't comfortable with it, and he fucking lost it. My phone kept lighting up with tons and tons of texts. This was before it was easy to block someone, and I didn't know how to. The old flip phone. And he was livid that I did such a disrespectful thing. I should be thankful he got those for me, so I got angry and told him I didn't ask him for the gifts. He basically threatened me to keep them and didn't take no for an answer when I told him I didn't friggin' want them. So essentially, he was the one who disrespected me. He backed down a lot then. I told him to stop texting me and to leave me alone. I got a few more texts, but eventually he stopped. It was weird at school, because I kind of avoided being around my friends when I knew he was there. I still hung out with some of them alone, like my best friend, But when I knew a friend gathering was going on, I wouldn't go. They understood. Now this is where I got stupid. I'm a very, very compassionate person, and 9 out of 10 times feel horrible for when I was mean to someone, even in this instance. I ended up texting the creeper one night, apologizing for how rude I was to him, and he said he understood where I was coming from, and we had a normal conversation for a little bit, until I fell asleep at around 11 p.m. I know this because I woke up at 2 a.m., looked at my phone, and saw the last text I sent him was a little before 11, stating I was tired. After I fell asleep, he sent me one text, so I didn't respond, texted again, so I didn't respond, kept texting. We talking on the verge of like 30 or 40 texts here, called me from his cell phone about 10 times, called me from another number about 15 times because he thought I was ignoring him, and then sent one last threatening message. If you don't respond within a half hour, I'm calling the police. I happened to wake up at 2 a.m., which was an hour after he sent that text, and flipped the fuck out, texting him that I fell asleep, and he better not have called the police. You want to know why he called the police? Because he interpreted me saying that I was tired as I was tired of living. He thought I killed myself. Never mind that it was, basically bedtime when he and Howard were talking, so yes, me killing myself is the most logical route to take here when I say I'm tired. I ran into my mom's room, told her what happened, and she goes, "For crying out loud, they have better things to do with their time. They aren't coming back to check on you." I go back into my room, which look out to our driveway, look out the window, see a cop car parked on the street, and 2 flashlights walking up the drive. They knock on the door, I opened it, and I'm pretty sure the look on my face told them everything. "Yes, Sally?" "Yeah." "You know why we're here?" "Yeah." "So, what happened?" I fell asleep. The police understood, and actually called the creep back, and told him to leave me the fuck alone, just as I was texting him to leave me the fuck alone. He then had the balls to ask for my address again. He had done this numerous times to come over and apologize to me, and that he loved me. I told him he doesn't even know me, and he had absolutely no reason to be in love with me. His reasoning was that's how he worked. He fell in love first, and then decided if it was the right person or not. Sorry, the dude was loony. This put a really big strain on my friendships at the college. His story was much more twisted and painted me as the bad guy, and I ended up making a lot of enemies, even with my best friend, because he labeled me as a whore. There was another guy interested in me as well amongst those friends, but he was much less assertive, and I didn't give him the time of day, and everyone believed him, even though at that time I was still a virgin. I had to drop out of school because that circle of friends was so big, and whenever the creep saw me, he would get irrationally angry, and his friends had to physically hold him back, which was a lot of people because he was massive. I since cut contact with all of them and ended up going to a different school that I love so much more and am in a much better place without all of them in my life. So, creep from school, I hope I never have to see you again.